Good afternoon, criminal files, and welcome to another episode of Homicide Cases. I'm your host, Misfit, and today I will be opening the file on Robert Alston, an American serial killer with 4 known victims. Robert Alston is identified as an American serial killer responsible for a series of sexual assaults and homicides committed in Greensboro, North Carolina, spanning the period between 1991 and 1993. Alston's criminal activity involved the targeted selection of vulnerable individuals, culminating in lethal violence followed by elaborate postmortem measures designed to frustrate identification and detection. His crimes encompassed the sexual assault and homicide of at least 4 women, whose bodies he subjected to dismemberment before scattering the remains across multiple sites. The systematic nature of Alston's offenses, characterized by repetitive targeting and a distinct methodology, defined him as a highly organized predator. Furthermore, his unique psychological signature involved making anonymous phone calls to law enforcement officials. This behavior was not aimed at confession or surrender, but rather at manipulating the developing investigation and ensuring he garnered media attention for his activities. The combination of calculated violence and active engagement with the authorities positions this case as a compelling study in instrumental homicide and narcissistic control. Alston's active offensive period concluded with his apprehension on January 28, 1994. Following a prolonged investigative and prosecutorial phase, Alston ultimately resolved the matter judicially through a global plea agreement. On September 3, 1998, he entered a guilty plea to all charges, which formally included 4 counts of first-degree homicide. The judicial penalty imposed was multiple life sentences, therefore bypassing a potential capital trial, which is standard procedure for serial homicide in North Carolina. Robert Alston is presently incarcerated and serving his sentences at the Columbus Correctional Institution located in Brunswick, North Carolina. Robert Alston was born on May 19, 1969, in Greensboro, North Carolina. His familial background was characterized by relative stability, though limited resources. His father, Jack Alston, worked as a school custodian, and his mother, Dorothy Alston, was employed as a factory worker. Despite being raised in a poor environment, the family was generally considered stable and respected within their community. The apparent lack of overt indicators of familial chaos or profound early trauma suggests that the etiology of Alston's destructive psychological trajectory may stem less from environmental reaction and more from internal development or stressors encountered during the transition to early adulthood. This contrasts with common profiles of serial offenders raised in overtly abusive or dysfunctional settings. Alston attended Grimsley High School in his hometown. During his adolescence, he acquired a reputation as a distinct social outcast. The documentation indicates an introverted nature marked by difficulty interacting with peers and a pronounced lack of close friends. Despite possessing a reasonably athletic build and being tall, he largely avoided extracurricular and social activities. His only marginal participation was in the Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC. an activity he reportedly paid minimal attention to. The profile of an individual who is physically capable yet socially isolated often correlates with the future criminal behavior characterized by detachment and the development of internal fantasies used to compensate for real world inadequacy and social failure. The later criminal acts, particularly the compulsion to interact with the media and police, suggest a violent effort to gain the recognition that was unattainable through conventional social means. Following his high school graduation in 1987, Alston's path toward conventional stability stalled. He briefly attempted further education at a junior college in Georgia, but lost interest rapidly, dropping out after only one semester. This period also marked the beginning of his domestic life. He established an intimate relationship with a woman, which resulted in the birth of a son in 1989. The 4 year span between his academic failure in 1987 and the commencement of the serial homicides in 1991 is critical. During this time, Alston experienced a failure to secure professional success, coupled with the imposition of adult responsibility, specifically fatherhood. This combination of stagnation and obligation likely created significant stress, potentially serving as a trigger for the manifestation of violence as a means of exerting ultimate power and control where social and professional control were absent. The serial offenses perpetrated by Robert Alston were restricted to a narrow time frame, specifically between 1991 and 1993, centered geographically in Greensboro, North Carolina. The official conviction count confirms 4 counts of first degree homicide. However, investigative estimates place the actual scope of his activities potentially higher, suggesting a total victim count ranging from 4 to 6 individuals. Alston's methodology demonstrated a clear pattern of victim selection rooted in opportunistic targeting of marginalized individuals. The victims were consistently young black women who were identified as either prostitutes or drug addicts. This selection process reveals a cold, calculated instrumentalism. By targeting members of the high risk community, those frequently engaging in high risk behaviors and lacking strong social or familiar support structures, Alston strategically maximized vulnerability. Such individuals are less likely to have detailed or immediate missing person report filed, minimizing the initial scrutiny from law enforcement and allowing the serial pattern to sustain itself over 2 years without swift detection. The means of securing the victims consistently involved Alston picking them up while driving his distinctive dark blue Pontiac. This detail provided a crucial piece of physical evidence linking the offender's operational vehicle to the selection phase of his predatory behavior. The 4 victims covered by the September 1998 guilty plea represent the legally confirmed scope of Alston's convictions. However, the subsequent investigation extended beyond this core group. In late 1997, Alston proactively contacted the prosecutor's office and claimed responsibility for the homicides of 2 additional women, Sharon Martin and Shemeka Warren. This assertion led to indictments against him in January 1998 for these 2 cases. While investigators reportedly struggled to uncover direct physical evidence linking Alston conclusively to the Martin and Warren cases, his voluntary claim provided significant leverage for the prosecution to achieve a global resolution. His cooperation in solving these additional cold cases likely served as a transactional component of the final plea negotiations, enabling the state to achieve public closure regarding these long missing women. Alston's criminal profile is defined by sexually motivated violence, with the offenses involving both rape and homicide. The successful prosecution on charges of first-degree homicide indicates the presence of premeditation and deliberation, suggesting the killings were not random acts of passion but were carried out with lethal intent as part of a planned operational phase of his crimes. The most distinctive and forensically challenging aspect of Alston's methodology was his post-homicidal treatment of the bodies. He was known systematically to dismember his victims' remains and scatter them in various geographically separate locations. This practice represents a highly instrumental form of violence aimed at achieving multiple strategic goals. First, dismemberment physically inhibits rapid identification by conventional means, making recognition via facial features or tattoos impossible. Second, the scattering of remains significantly complicates the forensic process, hindering efforts to establish a precise time, place, or manner of death. Third, and perhaps most profoundly, this extreme manipulation of the corpse serves as a psychological function of radical dehumanization, treating the victim as an object to be meticulously disassembled and permanently eradicated. This high effort operational security measure demonstrates an acute awareness of forensic investigation techniques and a strong desire to evade detection. Robert Alston exhibited a highly unusual criminal signature, intentional and persistent contact with the authorities. He initiated anonymous phone calls to investigators regarding his crimes, specifically designed to both mislead law enforcement and simultaneously gain media attention. This compulsion to engage the investigation demonstrates that his criminal motive transcends mere physical predation. The action of calling the police signals a psychological need for recognition and engagement, positioning Alston as an active controller of the narrative, moving beyond the physical crime scene and into the psychological sphere of law enforcement. This behavior is consistent with an offender driven by narcissistic needs, seeking validation and power by confounding the system tasked with pursuing him. The critical importance of this signature behavior is demonstrated by the fact that the remains of some victims, including those related to the late 1997 claims, were eventually recovered due to tips provided by an anonymous caller. Investigators strongly suspected this anonymous source was Alston himself, confirming his pattern of selectively releasing information to maintain psychological dominance over the resolution of the case, even while denying direct responsibility for the tips. The investigation concluded its active search phase with the apprehension of Robert Alston on January 28, 1994. The details surrounding the final investigative breakthrough are linked to an event in early January 1994, shortly before his capture. Research material notes that Alston encountered a 29-year-old woman in Guilford County who was attempting to hitchhike home to Greensboro. This encounter, likely a thwarted attempt at a fifth or sixth homicide, may have provided law enforcement with the critical evidence or witness testimony necessary to identify and locate him. During the investigative and pretrial phase, Alston was selectively cooperative. While claiming responsibility for the murders of Sharon Martin and Shemeka Warren in late 1997, he led investigators to a critical juncture. However, he initially refused to disclose his true motives for the killings or reveal the exact burial sites of the victims' remains, indicating an ongoing effort to withhold crucial information as a means of retaining control. Ultimately, the recovery of some remains, essential evidence for prosecution, was achieved through anonymous tips. The operational decision to use an anonymous caller to facilitate recovery while denying direct involvement confirms Alston's dedication to managing the public perception and legal reality of his crimes. A significant temporal gap between Alston's apprehension in January 1994 and his final guilty plea in September of 1998 underscores the complexity and legal gravity of the case. This nearly 5 year period was necessitated by intense activity, including exhaustive forensic analysis of the scattered remains, detailed psychological evaluations, preparations for a capital murder trial, and protected plea negotiations between the prosecution and the defense. On September 3, 1998, Robert Alston formally resolved the charges against him by pleading guilty to all counts. This included 4 official convictions for first-degree homicide. The resulting criminal penalty was multiple life sentences, which he began serving immediately. The decision by Alston's defense team to accept a plea agreement for multiple life terms in lieu of pursuing a capital trial constitutes a critical analysis point regarding the judicial strategy employed. Given the brutal nature of the crimes, the evidence of rape and serial methodology, and the use of dismemberment, North Carolina prosecutors possess compelling aggravating factors that significantly increase the likelihood of a jury recommending the death penalty. Pleading guilty, Alston guaranteed his permanent incarceration but successfully eliminated the risk of execution. This plea provided a clear outcome for the state, guaranteeing convictions on 4 counts of first-degree homicide without enduring the prolonged legal cost and appellate risk inherent in capital litigation. The inclusion of Alston's self-proclaimed victims, Sharon Martin and Shemeka Warren, in the pre-plea negotiations also served the state's interest by providing an avenue for official closure on those high-profile missing person cases. The guilty plea therefore served as a mutual strategic resolution, prioritizing legal certainty over protracted appeal battles. Despite the comprehensive guilty plea and the incarceration of the perpetrator, the investigative authorities have formally maintained that they are not willing to close the case due to unanswered questions. This official position is a direct consequence of the sophistication of Alston's methodology. The primary difficulty arises from the dismemberment and disposal of victims' bodies. Although investigators believe they have successfully identified all of Alston's victims, the missing links likely center on a potential discovery of additional incomplete remains or the unresolved status of the 2 claimed but weakly evidenced victims, Martin and Warren. The continued categorization of the case as open suggests lingering investigative uncertainty regarding the total victim count, which remains statistically categorized between 4 and 6. Alston's late-stage claim of involvement in the homicides of Sharon Martin and Shemeka Warren introduced significant complexity. The willingness of the state to pursue indictments in January 1998, despite the absence of strong direct evidence linking Alston to the cases, highlights the investigative pressure to resolve the disappearances of these women. The case of Robert Alston provides a high-level case study in organized, sexually motivated serial homicide coupled with deliberate forensic countermeasures. Alston's trajectory from an introverted social outcast to a predator targeting marginalized women demonstrates a manifestation of deep-seated desires for control and validation, which he ultimately sought to satisfy through violent domination and posthumous objectification via dismemberment. The long delay between his apprehension in 1994 and his judicial resolution in 1998 was primarily the result of the strategic complexity of the case, culminating in a critical plea agreement. This agreement secured Alston's lifelong imprisonment and resolved 4 confirmed homicides, alongside providing public closure on 2 additional women Alston claimed to have killed. This outcome confirms the legal assessment that certainty of conviction for multiple life sentences was prioritized over the extended risk and costs of a capital trial. Despite the judicial closure on 4 counts of homicide, the lingering refusal of law enforcement to officially close the entire file underscores the success of Alston's MO of dismemberment and dispersal of remains. This strategy ensures that complete certainty regarding the total number of victims and the full recovery of all physical evidence may never be achieved, leaving a permanent gap in the investigative record and reinforcing Alston's final act of control over the investigation itself. And that ends another episode of Homicide Cases as I close the file on Robert Alston. Join me next time where I will be opening the file on Joshua Anderson. This is Misfit signing off, and as always, stay safe.